page 57. We're on page 57. We skipped a few pages, I know. I'm going to get back to them, Be'ez Hashem. I want to start with a new sugya today, the Hilchot of Mayim Achronim. Okay, so Mayim Achronim, everybody knows this is the waters that you use at the end of a meal. There are different opinions about them. You'll see a lot of times with Ashkenazim, they're not really so makbid on them. Is there a reason for that, why they don't really do it? What's the process? How much water? Where are you supposed to put the water? Are you allowed to do it in a sink, over dishes? All these questions, Be'ez Hashem, we're going to see the practical halacha today. And if Hashem is willing, we'll be able to finish this whole sugya of Hilchot Mayim Achronim in one sitting. So let us begin. On page 57, the source of Mayim Achronim, where there are two sources in the Talmud on Mayim Achronim. We're going to start with source number one, and this is Masechet Chulin and Kufhei Amid Aleph. Over here it says, I'm Rabbi Idi bar Avin, I'm Rabbi Yitzchak bar Ashin, Mayim Rishonim mitzvah, Achronim chova. So Mayim Rishonim, which is Netilat Yadayim, that's a mitzvah. Mayim Achronim is a chova, is an obligation. Okay, I'm Rabbi Yehuda bar Eider Rav Chia. Why do they say Mayim Achronim is a chova? Why is Mayim Achronim an obligation? So answers the Gemara, Shemelech Sodomit yesh, Shemesama et ha'einayim. That Melech Sodomit, this is a very powerful salt. It's a very powerful salt, and people would use it while they were eating, and then they would touch their eyes, and they could get blind from it. So therefore, it was a sakana. It was a possible damage to a person's body. So therefore, they said you have to wash your hands at the end. Rashi explains, right? You look at source number 2 on page 57. Source number 2, Rashi says, Shemel Sodomit yesh. Because the Chachamim said every time you eat, you have to eat with some salt, right? Verse Melech. Since you touch the Melech, you touch the salt. Because you maybe place your hands on your eyes, you get blind, therefore you have to wash them. So, from a practical sense, the Gemara in Chulin says, wash your hands after you finish eating because you're touching powerful salt that may blind your eyes. That's why you have to wash your hands at the end. That's why it's called a chova. So Tosfot and Eruvin comments on this Gemara and says, Mayim Achronim, Achshav lo nahagu b'Mayim Achronim. Today, Tosfot, remember he's in France, Ashkenazic poskim, he says, we are not knowing this way to do Mayim Achronim. The aim Melech Sodomit Matzu B'nenu, because we don't have this Melech Sodomit. We don't have this salt from Sodom. Okay, in the footnote, in number 2 over here in the footnote, here the Tzurba Rabbanan editors want to say that the salt, Melech Sodomit, is salt that comes from or next to the Dead Sea. Remember, that's where Sodom was, right? That's where we understand where Sodom was next to the Dead Sea. They say in look at note number 2, the salt is probably magnesium chloride. Okay, it's a special high concentrated salt known as magnesium chloride, and that was a salt that is a dangerous salt. And since in France they were very far away from the Dead Sea, they didn't have it, they didn't use it. The Tosfot says you don't have to wash your hands because of that. He said another reason, because we don't put our fingers into the salt after eating. Some people used to have a minute to put the fingers into salt after eating, and then they would lick it or something like that. They would after the meal. He says we don't do that, so we never directly touch it. Okay, Masechet Brachot. Now is the second source in Shas that they're bringing. Should really be the first source in Masechet Brachot. It's earlier, but this is the second source in Shas about Mayim Achronim, and the reason given is different than Chulin. It's not because of Melech Sodomit. It's not because of the Sodomit salt. What does it say here? Tana. It says in Masechet Brachot, Daf Nun Gimel Amud Beit, on source number 4. Tana v'hit kadeshtem. It says in the pasuk you have to become holy. Elu Mayim Rishonim. V'hitem kedoshim, and you should be holy. Elu Mayim Achronim. These are Mayim Achronim. So you have 2 mitzvot. V'hit kadeshtem, v'hitem kedoshim. And the Gemara says v'hitem kedoshim means Mayim Achronim. Ki kadosh zeshemen ani Hashem lekechem zu bracha. Okay, so you have a source here in the Gemara that says it's a different reason, nothing to do with Melech Sodomit, but rather we have to be holy people. And how do you become holy? You wash your hands after eating. That second washing, something to do with holiness. So says the Rosh. We're now in source number 5 at Rishon, the Rosh. He says it's difficult. Here it seems Mayim Achronim is a mitzvah based upon holiness. In Brachot, it seems to be Mayim Achronim is something to do with Kedusha. you wash your hands like you wash Mayim Rishonim. It's for kedusha. Mayim Achronim is also kedusha. Uferikol basar, but in the perikol basar in Chulin, mash b'shein chov mipnei hasakana. But in Chulin, it seems to be you have to wash your hands, Mayim Achronim, because of a danger of your eyes might come blind. Shumel sodomit. So the Rosh wants to give a compromise, and he says, kedusha amru shehein mitzvah. Because of the holiness, it is a mitzvah. Because of the holiness of making ourselves holy, it is a mitzvah to Mayim Achronim. Mishum sakanat melech sodomit hosifu la'asota chova. So they made it extra chova because of a sakana. Right, mitzvah is 1 degree, but sakana is a lot more dangerous. So therefore, they made it to a 2nd degree. So according to the Rosh, there's a mitzvah of Mayim Achronim, and it applies now also to be holy. And then there was an extra part to it, a chova, of when you had a melech sodomit. So it is still considered a mitzvah today. The Rambam says, what does the Rambam say? Kol pacha melech bo tzarich until yadayim b'achron shema yesh bo melech sodomit or melech, or any type of salt, shetavu kamelech sodomit, that you also dip into it like melech sodomit, and you might put it over your eyes. Rambam says you have to always do it. It's a chiyuv to always do Mayim Achronim. The Rif on Chulin, he says the afilu imlo achal melech, even if he didn't eat salt, cover rabban chova. The rabban made a chova. Mishum the Mayim Rishonim hachilu basar, because Mayim Rishonim, that someone was given basar chazir, and Mayim Achronim hargu with the nefesh. Okay, there was 2 stories. One, someone didn't wash their hands and they got fed non-kosher meat, or it was this restaurant, a guy owned it, and he saw Jews who would wash their hands yesterday, he would serve them kosher. And if he didn't wash yesterday, he served you non-kosher. And one person didn't wash yesterday, so he thought he was a non-Jew, and he gave him pork to eat, and he ate even not kosher because Mayim Rishonim. What was his case? Because Mayim Achronim, no Mayim Achronim, hargu et hanefesh. So this is the story in Maseches Yoma, right? Maseches Yoma, what's the story there? That the rabbis went to this inn, and they gave some money for him, the guy, to hold, right? And he was not such a good guy. And when they came back to get it, he said, I don't have your money. But they realized that he did have their money, right? So what happened?
They went to his wife. They went to his wife.
I'm not going to give my money. The other 2 came in the morning. They said, we want to continue on our journey. He says, what money you want to give me? I don't have any money. So the mayor said, don't worry about it.
They hustled the wife.
He has left over on his beard.
Right. So they saw something left over on his beard, right? So what did the rabbi say? Since he didn't do Mayim Achronim, he had some beans left on his beard. So they went to the wife and they told the wife, oh, your husband said to give back the money. Improved. You had beans today for lunch or whatever. But she said, oh, yeah? Oh, okay, fine. She gave it back. Then he comes home later in the day and he says, where's all the money that we stole? She said, I gave it back. He got so upset at her and he killed her. Okay, so because he didn't do Mayim Achronim, it led to someone getting killed. So says the Rif, if someone can get killed for not doing Mayim Achronim, you better do Mayim Achronim. Okay?
He stole.
Yeah, he stole. He was a bad dude. He was a bad dude. He would have done Mayim Achronim. If he would have done Mayim Achronim, so you'll see some people do Mayim Achronim after they wash their hands Mayim Achronim, they wipe their mustaches. You ever saw that?
I didn't know.
Okay, by the way, that's not so clear if you should actually do that with the Mayim Achronim water. Some say you should actually wipe your mustache before you do the Mayim Achronim water. We'll get to it if we have time at the end. We'll move into that. But that was the concept, that he should have done Mayim Achronim and then washed his beans off his mustache, and then he wouldn't have killed his wife. Okay, obviously he's a bad dude, but we see from here that if you don't wash Mayim Achronim, someone can end up dead. Okay, we're going to get into the Kabbalistic part of this in a moment. The Kabbalah says you don't do Mayim Achronim, you have a very, 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 very bad time. But we'll get into that into a moment. Now we're going to the Shulchan Aruch. So we saw the sources. We saw the Gemara in Chulin, we saw the Gemara in Brachos.
I'm gonna do it. You're gonna have that.
Yeah, we'll get into it. Okay, so we saw the Gemara in Chulin, we saw the Gemara in Brachos, we saw the Rishon and the Rosh, Rif, Rambam, everyone seems to say it's a mitzvah. The only Rishon who seems to say it's not a mitzvah really is Tosfot. So what does Shulchan Aruch say? Shulchan Aruch says, Mayim Achronim Chova. That's his first. That's okay. So Simon Kuf Pei Aleph Narchaim, and Sif Aleph he says Mayim Achronim Chova. Comes to Sif Yud and he says Yesh Ein Noagim Litel Mayim Achronim. There are those who don't do Mayim Achronim. Even those who say like this, Adam shu istinus. You have a person who is an istinus. You can't take too much dirt, right? The person who's very iffy, he doesn't like dirt on his hands, and he has dirt on his hands, he cannot say Birkat Hamazon without washing off. According to Tosfot, according to those who say you don't have to wash your hands, that if your hands are dirty, that you don't like it, you must wash your hands. Mayim Achronim. I would say, in my opinion, it doesn't have to be followed, but in my opinion, most Americans are known as istinus. They eat with forks and spoons, and when their hands get dirty, they don't like eating with their hands most of the times, right? Unless they're eating some like really greasy food.
Don't touch the stove.
Right? And they don't, but they don't eat with their hands. They don't eat with their hands mostly. And so having dirt on your hands is something you would wipe away right away, and right away you would wash it or something like that most of the times. So most people I would be saying fits this category of Shulchan Aruch of being an istinus, that even according to Tosfot, you would still have to wash your hands. Let's take a look at the Darchei Moshe. Darchei Moshe, this is the Ramah, right? So the Ramah writes in the Sefer Darchei Moshe, Miu Amina K'divrei Tosfot. By Ashkenazim, the meaning is like Tosfot. We don't do Mayim Achronim. But the Mishnah Berurah says, source number 10, the Mishnah Berurah says, V'af achshav she'ein matzu melech sedomid b'neinu yesh l'chosh l'melech acher shetava k'mota. We have to be considered for other salt whose nature is similar to melech sedomid. And then he says, V'da'at hagra, and the opinion of the gra is that one must wash even today, right? It's still relevant today. Who says in the name the Mukubalim? The Gemara says you must wash your hands. Mayim Achronim. And this is also the Birkei Yosef. So the Mishnah Berurah pretty much says there's many reasons to be machmer for the Ashkenazim that they should wash their hands. Mayim Achronim. So here he mentioned about the Mekubalim. Mogan says Mekubalim. What's the Mekubalim's worry about not washing not washing your hands? So here in the Alkut Yosef, he brings down from a few sources. First, he brings down from the Peliot. Peliot says, just like Melech Sodomit can make a person physically blind, not washing your hands can make your soul blind, can make your nefesh blind, and therefore you have to wash your hands. The Zohar says that every meal there is a sitra achra there. There's a bad force there, and you have to feed that force. So what do you feed them? You feed them the Mayim Achronim. If you don't give them the Mayim Achronim, then they're going to attack you. So the Mayim Achronim is given to the sitra achra. You have to give it to them. In the Sefer She'elot Shuvot Min HaShemayim, he writes over there, if anyone fails to fulfill properly the Mayim Achronim, his lifespan is shortened. You know, the Mayim Achronim say you shorten your life, all right? Maybe based on like Gemara and Yuma, right? Someone got killed. Might be you that get killed. Bottom line is, says the Alkut Yosef, if you want to be protected from forces of evil that lurk amongst us, waiting to attack, make sure to perform Mayim Achronim properly. Says here the Penina Halacha. Penina Halacha is a Relezer Melamed. He writes, Lamaisa. He writes, most poskim say that one must wash Mayim Achronim. Marot Shadat wrote poskim. Shekam is maneu tzarich lital yadayim Mayim Achronim. Mishnah Berurah, Magen Avram. There are many poskim. Mishanim Achronim. Everyone seems to be saying you should wash it. But he writes, Rabbim noigim lahakil. But many people are makel of this. U'vneim t'min chachamim, v'noshim, tzkanios. You have great scholars and great women. They don't do it. He says the reason might be it's not a deoraita din, it's the rabbanon din. But he writes, for the ones whose hands are dirty, he definitely needs to wash it. Right? If it's really, really dirty, you're not going to pick up a book, then you definitely need to wash it before you do Birkat Hamazon. As we conclude this section, I just want to bring down from the Alkut Yosef, for us, Rabbatai, for us Sfaradim, what it is. And he writes, right? So the Achronim very clear. We are not to be makel. We're not to follow the Ashkenazim on this. We are to wash our hands, Mayim Achronim, after a Sukkah. Say again? Yeah.
Question. If a person is eating finger foods and then his hands are dirty, can he wash his hands and then right after do Mayim Achronim?
Yes. In fact, that would be obligated for him. If your hands are too dirty, that a little bit of water on the Mayim Achronim won't help you. The halacha is you should wash your hands with soap at the sink and then sit back down and do Mayim Achronim, or you can do Mayim Achronim at the sink. And then after you finish washing your hands with soap and stuff, then you use a little bit of water up until your palms for Mayim Achronim. We will get into that. We're going to see. We're going to get into that. That's part of the Tzurba Rabbanan in a moment. He writes in here further in the Alka Joseph, the person who is mekel on Mayim Achronim is reducing his life. Okay, so that is the Alka Joseph on the chiyuv of Mayim Achronim. Oh yeah, okay. Thank you. What's the name of it? Thank you. Very good. All right. So fine, everybody. On page 62, there is a kitzer. There is a diagram of what we learned. There was a Gemara in Chulin that because of Melech Sodomit. There was a Gemara in Brachos because of holiness. Tosfot says we don't have Melech Sodomit. No more do we have to do it. Darkei Moshe agrees. Shulchan Halacha say that's what most people do. Rif Rambam Rush. Rishayim say you have to do it even today. Shulchan Aruch goes with the Rif Rambam the Rush and Mishnah Berurah, Yalkut Yosef, and Rav Mordechai Eliyahu, and almost everyone else says Mayim Achronim is still a chova today. Okay. Second section, page 63. What about woman? Woman and Mayim Achronim. They don't eat bread from the beginning, right? Okay, they eat bread. You're surprised, women eat bread. They eat bread when you're not looking. Okay, they're eating the bread. So now they washed. Now, do they have to do Mayim Achronim? Some reason when it comes to Birkat Hamazon, Mayim Achronim, and these type of things, women feel like they're not obligated to that. Like they want to shake lulav and esrog and they want to say how the bracha and everything, but when it comes to doing the things that they are chiyuv of, all of a sudden like they're not interested in that. But let's take a look.
Only when you wash for hamotzi, or just in general?
Before Birkat Hamazon, right? So it'll be for hamotzi. It seems to be just for Birkat Hamazon before doing Birkat Hamazon. Hilchot Bat Yisrael. This is Rav Yisrael Yaakov Fuchs, and he writes. You say Melech Sodomit could be in anything. Yeah.
That's a very good question. But usually they were
Cooking in the kitchen.
Those days, 2,000 years ago, they were tovlim. They didn't have so much food, so they were taking the bread and putting a lot of salt. So the salt and bread was main thing.
Okay, so here I'm going to read you from the Ayat Yosef. You brought a very good point. No go shloila hakfed little yadayim achar mididat melech or hanachat melech or milpapon vikishun below suda. V'yesh machmir bezeh, and there are those who are machmir that do it even if it's not during a suda, but the minhag is to be mekel if it's not during the suda. The dinah of Mayim Achronim apply only when you're eating a motzi suda. Okay, now woman and Mayim Achronim. So Hilchot Bat Yisrael says until yadayim and Mayim Achronim kiv hashavel l'noshim ka'anoshim, women and men. Everything is saying this is Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach said, and this is the halacha that he brings down over here. He brings down from Rabbi Dr. Ari Zivotofsky in his Tzarech Iyon about Mayim Achronim, and he brings down that he brings down a whole list here. Rav Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld, Rav Shlomo Chaim HaKohen Aviner, Rav Vadia Yosef, Rav Yitzchak Yaakov Fuchs, Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, all held no different. Moshe Sternbach held that the Gra actually commanded the women in his house to do Mayim Achronim. No chiluk between men and women when it comes to Mayim Achronim. We all have to do Mayim Achronim. There is one mekel, and that's the next page, page 64. And this is the Shevet Halevi, Shalos Shuba Shevet Halevi. This is Rav Wozner, and he says, starting off, L'inyan Mayim Achronim in Heftel Ben Anoshim L'Noshim Mikra Hadin. Challah Poiskim, he says in Poiskim Baruch Chaim, Shaychiv Mayim Achronim. But meaning she'en noshim mitel kol kachu al pi hashulchan aruch sham the bezman hazeh lo yishayich klal Mayim Achronim rach machmirim la'atzmam v'noshim lo kabelu aleihem. So says the Shevet Halevi, according to Ashkenazim, the minhag is that you really don't have to do it because Tosfos say you don't have to do it. So now that the Mishnah Berurah is set to do it, Mishnah Berurah is being machmer, and the women didn't accept themselves to be machmer, so they hold like Tosfos. The women hold like Tosfos. Even the men should be machmer. The women didn't take this chumrah. That's what.
Not to do it.
Right, but the Mishnah Berurah says they should do it, and many of almost everyone says to do it nowadays. But the women didn't take this chumrah, so they're saying all the Ashkenazi poskim who currently are saying to do it, This is al pi chumrah, not like the Sfarim who say it's al pi din, and therefore the woman didn't take this chumrah.
So his question about Mayim Achronim without the bread, it's very obvious because Mayim Achronim is after Mayim Rishonim.
Right, you don't have Mayim Rishonim.
If there is no Mayim Rishonim, there's no Mayim
I'm
Achronim.
eating the same thing, but there's no bread.
Do you understand?
Fine.
What do you call it?
Let's
We
not
call
get
it Mayim
let's not
Achronim.
get carried away.
If there is, if you wash your hands on fruit or on something else, no.
You might have to. If you're being tuggled into water, your fruit, you might have to wash your hands.
having the same
Okay.
seudah, but no bread.
No bread. Okay, we're gonna deal with it. We're gonna.
But no Mayim Rishonim.
All right. Penina halacha. The Penina halacha in source 15. He wants to say another reason. He says, "What's the whole chumrah today? Well, why all of them being machmer? Because the Magen Avram said, "Al pi hamekubalim, you have to do it." So he says, women are not into Kabbalah. Women are not into Kabbalah, so they don't do the Mayim Achronim. What does the Yalkut Yosef say? Yalkut Yosef says for us Sfaradim who follow Yalkut Yosef, Ap Hanoshim Tzicha Litol Yedein L'Mayim Achronim. V'zehu. Okay. Okay. So we should tell our wives.
Why don't they say the same thing?
Their wives have been emancipated. They're independent. They have the feminist movement.
Your home. Nashim used to do Mayim Achronim. If yes, do it.
No, not saying if yes, do it. Allah has to do it now. There was a lot of things. There was a lot of things my grandmother used to do that was wrong, that they didn't know, that they were told the wrong halacha, or they were told Ashkenazic halacha, or they were doing something that's not the way that it should be done. We have to change it. That's why we're learning. That's why we're learning halacha, so we know what to actually do, not just someone did it, someone once so, or someone said something. Okay, so far we came out. We have to do Mayim Achronim as a chova. You must do it. It's a mitzvah for Sfaradim.
The woman too.
Woman too. Okay, so that's what we're up to right now. Now the question is, how much of your hands have to get washed? Like, where do you have to wash? I have to wash my whole hand, my wrist, my what? What's going on? So let's take a look. Masachet Chulin Kofei Amud Aleph, source 16. Gufa. Mayim Rishonim Achronim Chova. Emtziim Reshut. Okay, Mayim Emtziim. Everybody knows this, right? Baruch Hashem and my wife's side of the family, they're very makbid on this. After fish comes out, the keli again with the cup, and everybody washes Mayim Emtzaim between fish and meat. What you're supposed to wash your hands.
Even if it's gefilte fish.
Even if it's gefilte fish. No, if it's gefilte fish, then we bring out the soap too. You touch it with no hands. You touch it with no hands. Okay. Rishonim. Yeah. Oh yeah, Ashkan don't do Mayim Rishonim. They don't do Mayim Emtzaim. They do Mayim Achronim. Okay, but that's why we're learning halacha. Okay. Rishonim notlim bein bekeli bein al gabi karka. We do netilas yadayim. You can wash over a keli or you can wash on the ground. Doesn't make a difference. Achronim, the Mayim Achronim ain't notlim elu bekeli. You only wash Mayim Achronim into a keli. You cannot wash it onto the ground. And some say we don't wash it on the ground. Okay, so some say you wash it into a keli, and some say don't wash it on the ground. What's the difference? So the Gemara says, "My binayu, ikbinayu, kinsa." Kinsa is wood chips. Let's say I have something in between the ground and where I'm washing. So some sort of wood logs, wood pieces. Can I do it over there? Does it must be in a keli, or it just can't be on the floor? Okay, so that is the Gemara brings two shitot. So we're going to see the problems with people walking. Right. So we're gonna see all that's gonna come up. Kinsa, so says Rashi, what's kinsa? One place is wood slivers on wood chips underneath the water. According to the opinion, the water must be poured into a vessel. This is not a keli, so it's still not good. According to the opinion, when you may not pour on the ground, then it's okay. And he explains, like, there is a ruach ra when you pour it onto the ground. That phrase is very unclear. Pour what on the ground? The water directly onto the ground, or even after I put it in a keli, then I throw it back out, and it still has ruach ra, or if I put it in a keli, there's no more ruach ra, and then I can put it on the ground. Rashi's not clear. Rashi just says the ruach ra shur alein kishen agabe karka, and when they're on the ground. Pashut, it means only if you're doing it. Simple meaning is if you're doing it directly on the ground, then there's a ruach ra at that spot that you did it at. Right? The lavush is going to say no. Even if you put it in a keli and then you spill it out, it's still going to be a ruach ra on that spot. Okay, but we'll try to see if we get into that in a minute. So what are we asking? Like the first sheet in the Gemara that it must be in a keli, or the second sheet in the Gemara that as long as it's not directly on the floor. So it says the Torah. What does the Torah say? So the Torah says it doesn't have to be on a keli, it just can't be directly on the floor. The Rambam says Mayim Rishonim, Netlin ben al gabe keli, ben al gabe karka, Mayim Rishonim. But Achronim, the Mayim Achronim, ain't Netlin el al gabe keli, must be in a utensil. So Machloket Rishonim, Torah and the Rambam, where do you have to do it? Torah says it could be just not on the ground. It could be in something in between the ground. But the Rambam says must be in a keli. So says the Shulchan Aruch, Mayim Achronim, einotim al gabe karka, ela v'keli. Shulchan Aruch is going with the Rambam. Ifnei ruach ra sheshur aleim. Now he says, v'im ein loy keli, it doesn't have a vessel to do Mayim Achronim in, not till al gabe eitz and dokim v'chiyotze. And then you can put it on some wood chips, on the kinsa, on some wood chips, then it'll be fine. Because you don't have a recourse for it. But says the Shulchan Aruch, where should you be doing it in? You should be doing it in a keli. So what? We're gonna deal with the sink that's right on the next page. Give me 1 second to the sink. Before I move on to the sink, I want to bring from the Shla. The Shla outside the Tzurba. 1 second, just give me 1 second. Explain that according to Kabbalah, Mayim Achronim must be poured into a keli. According to the Mekubalim, it must be in a keli. Since water is designating for distracting the powers of evil. There's Ruach Ra, the Sitra Achra, and you're giving him the Mayim Achronim. You have to give it to him in a keli. This accomplished only if those spirits feel that they are being honored through it in a keli. So therefore, according to the Mekubalim, putting on the ground, even if there's wood chips, is not good enough. So according to Mekubalim, right, so Yosef, you like to practice Pi Kabbalah, you have to do it in a keli, right? Kabbalist used to be a Talmudist, now he's already upgraded to Kabbalist. Okay, so 1 minute. Okay, Mishnah Brura says, Ela B'Keli, you have to do it in a keli. Now, below Yitchov Yadav B'Tocha Keli, L'Rovtzim Ela Yishpoch HaMayim Al Yadav Shiar L'Tocha Keli. I can't have a bucket of water here, and I want to do Mayim Achronim and stick my hands into the bucket. That's not considered Mayim Achronim. Mayim Achronim must be that you're pouring the water on your hands. Okay, it must be poured. The Mishnah Brura says, That's what Tzim was saying. The problem is that when you pour it, there's a ruach ra there, there's a bad spirit, and when you walk over it, it's going to be a problem. But if no one's walking there, then it's okay. So the problem is it's a ruach ra, it's a bad spirit, and if you put it down on the ground, someone's going to walk over it, and it's going to damage them. Therefore, if you do it in a place where no one walks, seems not to be problematic. But again, according to the Kubalim, you got to do it in the keli because you got to give it to the Sitra. Right.
A little bit water in the bottle. Bring it outside the window. Or underneath.
So you have Mishnah Brura. So you're not knowing like Mekubalim, you're knowing like halacha, like halachalists. So it's fine. Your example, doing it under the table. Sleep on shulchan. Sometimes we remove the table. Nevertheless, they're going to dry by that time. Malkiel, yes, you had a question?
Yeah, just a quick question. If I ate bread in a car,
Yeah.
and then yeah, right, like and I did my Achronim outside in a goyish area, Goyim will probably pass over. Is that okay or no?
Yeah, do it.
I'm just gonna do my Achronim and then drive out, so it's okay.
Fine. Yeah, it's fine. Okay. By the time outside, by the way, it dries up very quickly. There's no real residue outside. I think even if a Jew did walk by, it's not going to be there anymore. Squirrel will drink it, right? But that's the situation. I don't know. Okay, fine. Now the question is everyone's question: can I do my Achronim in the sink? Okay, sometimes this happens. You're at a guest's house. They're not knowing to do Mayim Achronim. Maybe they hold like Tosfot, maybe they hold like the Ashkenazim, maybe they don't do it, maybe they don't know, whatever. And you don't want to be embarrassing and say, "Hey, where's the Mayim Achronim?" So you get up and you go to the sink, and you want to wash your hands, Mayim Achronim in the sink. Is the sink considered the ground, which would be problematic because you put it on the ground? There's a ruach ra there, right? If it goes directly on the ground, everyone holds that. Pour Mayim Achronim directly on the ground, that's the ruach ra there. So is the sink considered part of the ground because anything that's attached to the house has a din of being as part of the ground? Or do we say the sink's a keli and then it's a receptacle and it's fine? So in the Yabia Omer, Chamavadia says that it doesn't make a difference if it's considered the ground, doesn't make a difference if it's considered a keli, since the water that is poured into the sink goes to the drain, continues into the sewer in a location where people do not pass, and there's no concern for harm. It's entirely permissible to wash there without any concern.
He's asking, is it Kabbalistic, right? Or is it?
So according to the Kabbalist, it would not be good enough.
It's not a kli.
It's because according to the Kabbalist, you need to have it in a designated keli so they know it's for them. Putting it down the sink, I don't know if they're going to go into the sewer to get it. Again, I don't know the Kabbalistic. I'm explaining the best I could. You got to forgive me. The Chamavadia says the reason is even if it's ground, it's not ground that you're walking on. That's what Chamavadia says. Even if it's ground, if it's considered karka, you're not walking in that space. Therefore, it's not a problem. So he doesn't need to say that. He doesn't need to say it's a keli. Okay. Now the other issue is a lot of people do this now. What about if I have dishes in there? Oh, I can't do my Achronim over my dishes, right? Because you're putting a ruach ra on the dishes now. So says the Piskei Tzurba. Should be careful. There's no klei achila in there. The Yalkut Joseph here in the English edition, he seems to say that's really not a problem doing it, even if there's kalim in there.
When you have it's like the diamond morning.
Yeah.
You do it over the sink, even if there's dishes over there, because the idea behind it is also.
So what?
No, I'm saying you're right, but I'm saying anyway you wash the dishes.
So you wash the dishes. Very good. So Piskei Tzurba says that if you did do it, you should wash the dishes. Chaim Kanievsky also was asking. He said, just make sure to wash the dishes. Here in the Yalkut Yosef, he wants to say that even if it's filled with dishes, really is no problem at all. Again, according to the simple way of learning halacha, it's a ruach ra only if it's directly over ground. Then the ruach ra exists. If you did it over anything else, there is no ruach ra. So if you did it over dishes, there's no ruach ra. That's what he wants to taina, right? The Levush says no. It doesn't matter even if you do it in a keli, it still has a ruach ra. Even if you pour it, it still has a keli. So it depends how far you're learning the ruach ra exists and how it comes into place in the first place. Okay, so that's what it depends on. But everyone holds the best course of action is if you did do it over dishes, wash your dishes first. And the truth is, if you put the dish in the sink, you're gonna wash it afterwards. You're not taking it out, eating it from it directly again. So it shouldn't be any problem. Like I remember once I was at someone's house and I did it over their dishes and they went a little bit mad. Wow, you just ruined all my dishes. You put the ruach ra there. Someone's not a problem. Just wash it. He said, I can wash it for you if you want. After Shabbat, I'll come wash it for you. But that is the halacha. If you did it over the sink, in the sink, it's okay. If you did it over dishes, it is fine. What about saying Birkat HaMazon with the Mayim Achronim at the table? I did Mayim Achronim, everyone did Mayim Achronim, and it's still at a table. A lot of times you'll see people say, take it away, take it away. I said, run there, I take it away. We don't want it at the table. Can a person say Birkat HaMazon with it's still at the table? So says the Or Letzion, he writes over here, he says that once you did it in a keli, there's no longer a ruach ra in there, so therefore you can say Birkat HaMazon in front of it. Because again, he's learning like what? Ruach ra only exists when you do it over ground. You do it into anything else, there is no ruach ra. Right? That's the halachic way of looking at it. Take a look at the Yalkut Joseph in the English edition on page 146. In halacha 25, he says over here, it's good to be strict. When you do Birkat HaMazon, it's best to take it away. When Mayim Achronim is in front of you in the keli, it's not Isser min adin to say Birkat HaMazon. However, midat hachasidut, it's a good thing to do is to remove it from the table. Again, This is all based. Is there ruach ra in that water now or not? Lavush says yes. Others say no. So how far do you go with it? He brings here in the Shari Tshuva. He brings that also those who are the Devar Hashem Shelo Likot Levarach Neged Hamayim Shitlu Behem Shachrit Chen Yenoig Hagoin Mofot Hador Chaim Avu Laafia also was very annoying not to do this in front of there. Rav Wozner, he also writes, removing the knives and the Mayim Achronim from the table before it becomes the zone is certainly only halacha that is lichatchila, but the ain't me'akev. Is it pashut? He says this is simple. It's not me'akev. It's on the table. You can still do bekat hamazon. And the Orchot Rabbeinu, they mentioned that the Stipler Gaon was once at a sheva brachot for his granddaughter, and they did Mayim Achronim. They left it at the table, and it was next to the Stipler Gaon. So he took a paper napkin and he covered it. Okay, that's what the Stipler Gaon did. So it seems to be that if you can't take it away, at least try to cover it. Here I put down note 152. Piskei Tshuva adds on that just as there is a basis for removing empty utensils from the table before reciting Birkat Hamazon, or saying Birkat Hamazon, you don't want to have all the garbage on the table, so you want to remove it. There's even more of a basis for removing the used Mayim Achronim, since it might have a Ruach Ra. According to this, even if the water is covered, it should still be removed. And that's what the Piskei Tshuva wants to say. However, the halacha does not demand removing it at all. The Piskei Tshuva adds on in source 28, but keli pashut mazul. It should be a cheap and simple keli. All right, you're giving it to the sitra achra. You don't need to even to the ruach ra. You don't need to get a fancy keli for the ruach ra. You can get a simple keli when doing Mayim Achronim. Okay, so that is about the waters, where you can do it, and what type of keli. Now we're going to go to the proper procedures. Page 70. Proper procedure of doing Mayim Achronim. Okay, how far do you have to do it? We know when it comes to the Til Yadayim that we are noeg to do up to the wrist, right? There was a question here or here, and we said that we go up to, even though Mikra didn't wash up to here, we go up to here to wash for Mayim Rishonim, for the Til Yadayim. What about Mayim Achronim? How much do you have to wash? And with how much you have to wash with? Okay, so says the Torah Tabayit, so this is the Rashba, and the Rashba says, Mayim Achronim she'enin al lirchot lichlo chamachol shal yadav roichet ad perik bet shel kishrei etzbaot. You're going to go up to the second joint. So you take a look at my finger, right? This is joint 1. You can crack a knuckle over here. You can crack a knuckle over here. This is joint 2. So according to the Rashba, in his Torah to buy, all you have to do is to the second knuckle. So not up to here, not to the palm, but rather up to here. Okay? That's the Rashba. The Ravad, no, this is Rabbeinu Bechaya, or Rabbeinu Bachya, he says, and it's Kara Kamach, Mayim Achronim, in Tzichin El Pasat Hayad, B'Makom She'etzba'ot Kelin. The point of the ends of the fingers, which means up to the palm. So according to Rabbeinu Bechaya, you want to go up to here. Okay, up to these nuts. Okay, so you have a machloket now. We've shown him here or here. So here or here. All right, that's the machloket we've shown him. Shulchan Aruch says, "En tarich lital el ad perik sheni." So Shulchan Aruch says we only have to go up to the second. Okay, what does the Yalkut Yosef say? Very important to look this up because we're going to see this place we are knowing like Mekubalim. So says the Chamavadia over here, and Ritzak Yosef says in the Yalkut Yosef, according to his father, he writes, according to the Shulchan Aruch, you only have to wash your hands at Mayim Achronim up to here. But other posts can say up until the palm. In practice, one must follow this opinion, up until the palm. And he brings here that the Arizal instructed us to pour water over all 14 segments, right? So you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, right? And so 14 on each. Yeah, okay, very good. So you have it on 2, you have to wash until there, it says the Arizal. And the Maran Shon Zion said, this is what we should have done. The Kaf HaChaim Sofer said that if the Arizal, if the Maran Shulchan Aruch would have known that the Arizal said this, he also would have brought this in the Shulchan Aruch. It's like to do it up until here. So based, and that's what the Ben Shchai said, and that's the Rishon Tzion Chamovadia said. So we practice, although Shulchan Aruch says you only wash up to here, we practice to do it up to here, as the Mekubalim say to do. Okay, so that is the practice.
He's asking how much water.
Ah, very good. How much water? You. Okay, listen here. Listen here, says the Mishnah Berurah. He says, there are some people who are careful who do Mayim Achronim. But they not, they do it, but they're doing it all wrong. The cloud, they don't put they just put a few drops of water on their fingers. And then they go back and forth like this. That's not the way to do it. You have to go up until he says like halacha will be up until here, but we practice up until here. You should use enough water to go up to there.
If we don't do it right, it means we didn't do it at all.
The what?
We didn't do it right, we didn't do it at all.
Yeah, you didn't do it at all. If you didn't do it the right way, you didn't do it at all. Piskei Tshuva says, he says many people, they pour water on one hand and they smear it on the other hand. That's also wrong. You got to do it on both hands.
We showed in the light, it means we didn't do it right way.
What?
We showed in the light.
Yes. According to Mekubalim, yeah. I just want to read here the Alka Joseph for one moment. How much water are you supposed to use? One should use as little water as possible for Mayim Achronim, because you're giving it to the Sidracha, you're giving it to the Ruach Ra. So why are you going to give him so much water? So you should use a little bit, but enough to wash your hands, enough to get it washed. He says if one's hands are soiled significantly and in need of thorough washing, one should wash them as necessary, while having in mind that his washing is not the mitzvah of Mayim Achronim. You don't want to give so much water to the Ruach Ra, right? For the Ruach Ra. Afterwards, he should pour a minimum of water on his hands for the sake of the mitzvah. That is a proper procedure he brings out over here. Okay?
We bring a little bit to the table because we don't want to give a lot to.
Right. We don't want to give a lot.
Don't make now. And it's only a little bit supposed to be.
Enough that this gets washed, that this part gets washed. Just like that.
Every part of it, nothing
It should
left dry.
It should get washed. Should get washed up until here. That's what he says.
Those cups that I normally use not enough for guests, 2-3 people. You have to go to the sink and I'll do it because
So
that
bring a
whole
bigger
cup is basically 2 people, huh?
Yeah.
To watch
So you
the
might have
whole
to get a
thing
big-
according to Arizal.
That's the way we're supposed to be knowing. We're supposed to wash up until here. So you have to use a bigger cup.
That's a lot of water, yeah. It's not like a little drop.
Not so much. It's not like you're washing your whole hand. You're washing up until here. And you don't have to pour so much. Just gotta make sure it gets wet. What's on this side, and then you finish up. Okay, what about drying your hands after Mayim Achronim? Yeah.
Also, we need to use a keli to wash or just under the sink.
You do not need to use a keli to wash.
To run the water.
You can run the water straight from the sink. Well, some say you have to use a keli, but we're not knowing that you need to use a keli. You just need to have water. You just need to have water. Okay? Drying one's hand after Mayim Achronim. Let's take a look. Rambam says, Tzarech Adam to dry his hands. Same thing. If you're doing Mayim Achronim, you have to dry your hands afterward. That's what the Rambam says. But the Bet Yosef brings from the Rashba and the Torah to buy it that you do not need to dry your hands. And so says the Sefer Shulchan Shel Arba, as well as the Kol Boy. So says the Shulchan Aruch, Yesh Arm Shemayim Achronim Einem Tzricha Niguv. You don't need to dry them. For the Rambam, you have to dry them. So what? You don't need either. Says the Alka Joseph. Technically, it's not necessary to dry the hands after performing the mitzvah of Mayim Achronim. Nevertheless, it's recommended to dry them in the deference of the opinion of the Rambam. So, in order to give kavod to the Rambam, we should dry them. Now, here comes the issue that we spoke about before. Here comes the issue that we had before about wiping the mustache. Okay. Yeah.
Whatever fell into the kli, it canceled. Right? Whatever falls into the ground, it's not canceled. Well, what if it's in his fingers?
So it seems to be the way that we learn the halacha is only if you pour the water onto the floor, then it becomes ruach ra. That's the way we pass on halacha.
What about the ones in the hand?
It's not ruach ra. Not ruach ra. Okay, but according to Mekubalim, it is. We say it's not. So now comes the issue of wiping the mustache, because if you're saying your hands are ruach ra, that even you washed it, now there's still ruach ra. According to those like the Levush and others of the Mekubalim say there's still ruach ra. Then what are you going ahead and wiping your mustache with ruach ra fingers? And it seemed that was the whole story in Yuma. The guy still had the beans on his mustache. How are you supposed to wash it? You're supposed to wash it with water or something, your wet hands. But how are you doing it? You have ruach ra on your fingers. So it must be that they didn't hold like the Kubalim, right? He was a bad guy. Or what the Chacham say to do with the mustache, he brings over here that what you should do. Says he brings it from the Ben Ish Chai in Parshat Shlach. He writes that if someone's mustache is soiled, he should wash it clean before doing Mayim Achronim. That's what it meant. The Gemara says that he had it on his mustache because you're supposed to wash your mustache before Mayim Achronim. So I was sitting at a Yeshua recently, and one of the rabbis did Mayim Achronim, and he right away took his hand and did Mayim Achronim, and he washed his mustache. According to Ben Ish Chai, that's wrong. You should be washing your mustache first and then doing Mayim Achronim. So there's a separate wash for the mustache. Use the mustache wash, and then you wash your hands for Mayim Achronim. That's what it seems to be, and that Kabbalistically makes more sense, because Kabbalistically there's still a ruach ra even on your fingers. So that would make more sense with the mustache issue over there. The Mishnah Berurah, why does the Rambam hold you have to dry your hands? The Mishnah Berurah says the Rambam holds there is no washing without drying. There's a process. It's washing and drying. So if you don't dry, it's not considered that you washed anything. So that's what the Rambam says you have to wash. But Shulchan Aruch is makel on this. He further brings over here the Mayim Achronim. This is the halacha. The Mayim Achronim ain't tzrichen shir. There's no shir how much you have to use. That you have to just wash your hands. It has to get wet. But he brings of Sefer Ma'aser Rav. This is the Vilna Gaon, his actions, how he behaved. It says that he used a revi'it. However, the Chazon Ish was mechalik on this Ma'aser Rav and said it's not true. The Gaon did not do that. So even though there's a Ma'aser Rav that says the Vilna Gaon did use a revi'it of water for Mayim Achronim, Chazon Ish was mechalik in it and said that the Gaon did not use a revi'it of water. So we saw the halach on that already. That is our halach. You have to use any amount of water that washes it. It doesn't have to be a revi'it. There's no minimum that you need for it. What about the final sugya before we end this off? The final sugya in Mayim Achronim for us tonight is, I did Mayim Achronim, can I talk now? Right? The Gemara says, take it for Achanatila, you have to make a bracha, right? And we said over there, seems to be talking about Mayim Achronim. So can you talk after doing Mayim Achronim? So Mishnah Berurah says, Tzarech lizar shelo lahafsik bein hanatila berkat hamazon va'afilu b'divrei Torah. Once you do Mayim Achronim, you can't even talk divrei Torah, says the Mishnah Berurah.
Why does he say asur? He says tzarech lizar.
Tzarech lizar. Okay, so we're going to see there's a Shulchan Aruch Harav that seems that it's the Harav that says it might be mutter to talk. So maybe that's why he's saying that. Piskei Teshuvot, he also writes that a person should not talk. If one washed his hands from Mayim Achronim and needed to relieve himself, he should recite Birkat Asher Yotzer, and then he does another time Mayim Achronim. If he heard lightning or thunder and he said it the bracha, and then again he should wash his hands. But for other Divrei Kedusha, you should not interrupt. You shouldn't answer. He says, therefore, all the Al Naharot Bavel, Shir Hamal, Lot, and everything that we say before Birkat Hamazon should be said before Mayim Achronim. According to Piskei Teshuvot, all those introductory paragraphs and verses should be said before you do Mayim Achronim. Halacha Berurah, Rav David Yosef Shlita, he writes that it is mutter to say the customary things that we say after doing Mayim Achronim. So Avarachat Hashem Mecholet, Tamid Tildo Lefi, Sof Davar Kol Nishma, V'daber Elai Zeh Shulchan, everything that we say beforehand, it is permissible to do even after Mayim Achronim. Here he brings on, I'm going to go back to page 144 over here. He brings that over here. The halacha from the Yalkut Yosef. Some people have the minhag of saying Mayim Achronim Chova. And you don't must say Mayim Achronim Chova, you have to do Mayim Achronim. But you don't must say Mayim Achronim Chova, but that minhag is to say it. And some say by saying Mayim Achronim Chova, you're Yotze Divrei Torah at the Suda. Okay, so Mayim Achronim Chova, right? That's a halacha. So you're Yotze Divrei Torah at the Suda. He writes over here, one must take care not to speak after performing the mitzvah of Mayim Achronim and before reciting Birkat Hamazon. It's forbidden to speak about any topic, even about Torah. If someone does speak, he should perform it again, and then there will be no interruption between the mitzvah and Birkat Hamazon. So, seems that the Yalkut Yosef is very careful, but then he writes, it is permissible to say Lamatzeach Meginot of Arecha and the other verses that are customary to say beforehand. He writes further, one must not allow a long time to pass after performing the mitzvah of Mayim Achronim. Really, you shouldn't even let 12 seconds to pass between Mayim Achronim and Birkat Hamazon unless you're waiting for other people to finish Mayim Achronim. But you should, if you're doing it alone, you shouldn't even let 12 seconds pass. You should do it immediately. Take it. It's definitely forbidden, he writes, to get engaged in any activity. But you're allowed to go to another room or into the kitchen to perform Mayim Achronim there at the sink and then come back. That would be permissible. Okay, so that is halacha. So what about Tzur Mishalo? You have to do it before, because that's not a customary thing to say before Birkat Hamazon. So you would have to sing Tzur Mishalo. If you sing Tzur Mishalo, you should sing it before doing Mayim Achronim, not once you do Mayim Achronim. Once you do Mayim Achronim, you shouldn't really be talking. The Shulchan Aruch HaShulchan, the Aruch HaShulchan over here, he brings a lenient opinion. He says the Rambam writes at the end of chapter 6 of Hilchot Berachot, one should recite Birkat Hamazon directly after washing one's hand, and he should not interrupt between them about another matter. It is even forbidden to drink water after washing Mayim Achronim until one recites Birkat Hamazon. So this is the wording of the Tur and the Shulchan Aruch and Rashi. Immediately after Tiyat Mayim Achronim comes the bracha, and one should not eat anything until he recites the bracha. From all this, he says it sees its impaired, only forbidden to interrupt between Mayim Achronim and Birkat Hamazon by eating or drinking, but speech is not considered an interruption. So that's the Aruch HaShulchan, and that's maybe the kula of it. What does he continue? Maybe not considered a hefsek. Most poskim do not permit speaking the chatchila after washing Mayim Achronim, and even the Aruch HaShulchan himself later recommends avoiding any unnecessary delay. Nevertheless, perhaps the Aruch HaShulchan can serve as a defense for those who sometimes speak after washing Mayim Achronim prior to Birkat Hamazon. But it seems to be that you cannot talk after doing Mayim Achronim. You have to start Birkat Hamazon immediately. Right. Right. That's what we said. That's might be the kula of a lot of being talking between Mayim Achronim and Birkat Hamazon, but we shouldn't hold on that. We should not hold on that. It's you're looking too much in over here.
I just want to know what I'm telling somebody that he's talking between Mayim Achronim.
You tell him the Rambam says, Shulchan Aruch says not talk. That's what you tell him.
No, but should I even mention it?
Yeah, you should mention it. You should mention it. You don't mention it right that second. He may not listen, but when you could tell him, you should tell him. I just wanted to, you asked about using a keli. So here in the Yalkut Yosef, he says, Mayim Achronim ain't tzarech lahem keli. You don't need a keli. You don't need a person to pour it on you. If someone wants to do it with a keli, with himself pouring it, bracha will come in him, but you don't need it from a keli. Think it's fine. Open the thing and you can do it over there. Okay, so this ends off the sugya of Mayim Achronim and Tzurba Rabbanan. Anyone have any questions before we sign off from the shir? Okay, get. All right. Don't hang up. Don't hang up.
Those remaining waters.